Okay, everybody, we now have a Singaporean orthopedic surgeon, alumni of the Ortho Show. That's right, Dr. Zubin Daruwalla, who is an orthopedic surgeon in Singapore. I found him on LinkedIn. I think it's just amazing the network that we have around the world at this time. He's fascinating. He trained at the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland, and we share that. We'll talk about that fun part of our connections. He trained also in England and then went back home. And he's passionate about clinical medicine and how he loves taking care of patients. We discussed a little bit about the Singaporean system as well. But then also he's really, sort of moved on just from orthopedics. He's in the business space, the healthcare business space with Price Waterhouse. He does a lot of international work there. And then he also is a consultant for startups in the medical technology space. So he's got a lot of vision and ideas and concepts in technology as well. It's a really fascinating episode. And we are thrilled to be able to share this from around the world. And it is once again another great episode. Dr. Scott Sigman, #follow the fro.
From Medical Media, this is The Ortho Show.
Hello, world. Dr. Scott Sigman, your favorite opioid-sparing orthopedic surgeon, here for another episode of the Ortho Show podcast, where everyone knows we bring you the best of orthopedics, and we are traveling halfway around the world to Singapore, where we have Zubin Daruwalla, who is a general practitioner who practices orthopedic surgery in private practice in Singapore. He describes himself as a doctorpreneur, as well as a health tech advocate. And Zubin, what a pleasure it is to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us.
Likewise, Scott. Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, what time is it over there right now?
It is 6:40 a.m., a little bit later than when we used to start rounding.
All right, but that's good. We're 12 hours apart, so it's working out really good. Congratulations. You are this first Singaporean Ortho Show alumni. We're thrilled to have you on.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So we found each other on the great wide world of LinkedIn, which is such a common place for the world to connect with one another, which is why I love it so much and such a big part. Look, we always start these shows at the beginning. We want to know, where were you born and raised? And I guess there's a little history of some bootlegging going on. We'll get to that. But, were there any other doctors in the family before, you became a Daruwalla? And you'll tell us what that derivation means as well. But where did it all start for you?
Well, look, I was born in Bombay, India, although, it's called Mumbai now, right? But I moved to Singapore when I was a year old. So my folks moved from Scotland to Bombay to Singapore. I've been in Singapore pretty much my whole life. I grew up here. I went to school here. I did the army, and I actually even played hockey for Singapore. So Singapore's always been home. But I did leave, and I went to Dublin, Ireland, back in the late 90s to study medicine. I graduated from Dublin at the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland, practiced in Ireland for a number of years, moved over to Oxford, and then decided to come back home in 2012 to be with my dad, because I lost my mom from a medical mistake about 25 years ago. And I've been back home since. So trained in orthopedic surgery in Ireland and the UK, then back in Singapore, and then have kind of made a little unusual path for myself over the years. To answer your question, really, I'm a minority community. I'm Parsi, which is really a Persian race. There are only about 500 of us in Singapore. There are about 50,000 of us globally. And my surname actually means alcohol man. So somewhere down the line, a great-great-grandfather was a bootlegger. But that changed because you asked if anyone in the family is a doctor. So that really the only ones in my family who went down the path of medicine were my late father, who was also an orthopedic surgeon, and he was a spine surgeon. He started scoliosis surgery here in Singapore. And my aunt, actually, my dad's sister, who's still alive in Malaysia in her late 80s. She's also a doctor, but no one else. My dad actually dissuaded all of us from doing medicine, but that's a story for another day.
So you're a Singaporean Parsi Daruwalla, which is alcohol man, bootlegger, turned orthopedic surgeon because your father basically was an orthopedic surgeon as well. That's a great story, I got to tell you. I love the full circle there. But so you're in Singapore, and I'm fascinated to that you make the jump over to Ireland for your medical training, and I'm assuming that was a relatively common pathway for kids that were growing up in Singapore that wanted a medical career. Did you go elsewhere? Was that relatively common?
It was common, and I'll be completely honest. A lot of people said, why Ireland? Apart from RCSI being rated one of the best medical schools in the world, at the time, truth be told, when I applied to med school, RCSI was the only med school that I got admission into. But it turned out for the best, really. They are one of the few med schools that don't only look at grades. You don't need straight A's to get in. And a lot of kids were actually going to Ireland. There are three main medical schools in Ireland. And so, yes, it was a common path. But the interesting thing was the year I went was actually the year they did not register those Irish medical schools in Singapore. They came up with a recognized list of medical schools. And then RCSI was taken off that list. Subsequently, it was put back on the list. But the year I went, fewer people than usual applied to Ireland because they were scared that they wouldn't be able to come back to Singapore.
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea is you're going to go get a medical degree and then you want to come back home and be able to set up practice. So that sort of, creates a barrier to the pathway. Now, listen, I don't know if you know this. I may have mentioned it, but we're Irish brothers of another mother. I am, an honorary member of the Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland. I received my degree about 5 years ago. It was my opioid sparing journey, and went over there and gave a few talks on my pathway there and my journey, and it was exceptionally well received. Invited back to Trinity College, and there I was in the midst of the room with the guy with the big thing and like all this pomp and circumstance and all these like famous people up on the wall and stuff. And then sure I am at the age of 52, the old guy in the room with all the graduating medical students, and I became an honorary member. It was super cool. I loved it, man.
That's awesome. We didn't discuss that, but yeah, we did touch on it, and that's awesome that we have that common link. There's always an Irish link somewhere. There's always
yeah. I mean, they are professional in Dublin when it comes to pub crawls. I can tell you that. I did experience that, and we went to the Guinness as well as where else. We went to all the important places when it came to Dublin, but. Yeah, that's a very fond memory. My dear friend Sean McMillan, as well as Alejandro Badilla, we love to give it out shout outs here, joined me in that path. And the three of us, received our degrees at the same time. And it was a very special moment for us. I still cherish it.
That's awesome. I mean, I'm sure you heard this one, right? So in Ireland, three things within a 1 kilometer radius of any major institution, right? That's a church, a school, and a pub.
That's it. And you can find people in all of them at the same time, regardless of what time of day it is, right?
I was going to say 11 in the morning, right? In Ireland is when they open.
Yeah, we got about three quarters of the way through the pub crawl, and then I had to call Uncle. But no, it was still a great experience and something I am so fond of. But listen, so you go through the whole thing, you go through your registrar training, and then you're going to do orthopedics. You even go to the United Kingdom and you spend some more time there. And then you got to go back to Singapore, though, and you got to start over because you didn't get a lot of credit for all the time and energy you put over there.
Yeah, it was an interesting story. I mean, as I mentioned, my mom passed away 25 years ago. I have two brothers. One's in the US. One was back in Singapore at the time. And my dad was alone, and he had an orthopedic clinic, and I just wanted to spend more time with him. He did tell me at the time, and sometimes I wonder if it was the right move, though I guess I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if I hadn't moved. He said, don't come back. Stay there, finish all your training, do your fellowship, and if you want to at that point in time, come back. Because he was a visionary in his own right. He foresaw the future of medicine way back, even when I was in secondary school in the early 1990s. He said medicine is going to be different by the time you graduate, and the practice of it is going to be different. And are you sure you want to go into that? And I didn't understand what he meant at the time, but looking back, he was right in a number of ways. It has just changed in some ways for the better, but in many ways for the worse. And I think you and I, talk about it on LinkedIn sometimes, and we blog about the challenges we face in medicine and how it's changed on multiple levels. So in hindsight, maybe I should have stayed. In fact, my wife and I were very fond of Dublin, and we had a place there. We were going to make it home, but it is what it is, right? And here I am today.
Yeah, no, now you're home and you'd spend some time with your dad, but it sounds like, is your father retired at this point?
No, so he passed away 8 years ago, from kind of unknown causes. He had, I mean, it's a funny story that way. He was a spine surgeon. He had surgery on himself for his spine, and the day before he was due to come home, he collapsed in the ward in the room, and was put in ICU. And we found out a couple of days later that he had an advanced medical directive. So we didn't really have a choice but to turn things off. So yeah, that was 8 years ago now.
Yeah, well, I'm very sorry to hear that, but
Thanks.
you're continuing the legacy of dad, and you're back in
Trying
Singapore at
to.
this point. Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting because I know that you're in private practice, but if you Google and check out Zubin, we see a lot of other things, and it's like you're passionate about technology in healthcare, you're passionate about public speaking, and you seem to have taken on other roles outside of clinical practice. So describe some of the things that you're doing, outside of orthopedics.
Sure, Scott. So usually, I guess I wear three hats, right? And the first is remaining a practicing clinician, right? Because that's what I hold closest to my heart. I do it I continue doing it for the same reason I went into it, that I truly believe that as doctors, maybe I'm biased, but specifically as orthopedic surgeons, and you can appreciate this, right? I think my dad used to tell me when I was a kid, you sure you want to go into medicine? You're going to be the poorest of the three brothers, but if you do, you'll be the happiest. And that, the satisfaction is unparalleled compared to any other career, in his opinion. And I genuinely believe that. I mean, the satisfaction we get, we fix a broken hip, this last weekend, my friend's 3-year-old fell down and had a supracondylar fracture of his elbow, which I referred to a colleague of mine, and I assisted, late in the night on a Sunday. That satisfaction of getting people back to their normal function, right? I still believe today, we are privileged to be in that position, to be given that trust. And it is a satisfaction that's unparalleled in any other career. So that's the first thing. And that's, I think, my main, like, what is Zubin? That's the main Zubin, right? That practicing clinician part, for those reasons. The second hat I wear is in a corporate role. So I work for PwC, where I lead the Asia Pacific Health Industries practice.
Is that Price Waterhouse? Is that Price Waterhouse?
PricewaterhouseCoopers. Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
And that has been the most interesting part of my career. I switched from clinical medicine, and again, and maybe a story for another day, but it started with a patient actually at the National University Hospital who kind of linked me up 8 years ago. So I've been with PwC 8 years now. And what that has given me is it has opened my eyes to the business side of medicine, which interestingly, I think, so when I first moved, it was like, am I going to the dark side? But, it took me a couple of years to appreciate the business side and realize that, it's not a bad word. And in medicine, as in any career, ultimately, it is a business, and it must be a business, because if it isn't, it's not sustainable. And, we look at public health systems, and I won't mention any in particular, but I'm sure you're aware of the different health systems. Those that are free, or traditionally have been free, we are now seeing the implications and the difficulties they're facing today, right? And Singapore is a very unusual place because it's a system that isn't the same as anywhere else in the world. It's taken bits and pieces from around the world and come up with its own way of financing, right? So that, I think, has been the most important lesson for me. The business side of medicine, but maintaining the compassion, the empathy, ensuring that people have access to care. which actually reminds me of a quote that was given to me by a Singaporean doctor more than 25 years ago, when I did my epidemiology project on the Singapore system when I was in med school in Dublin. And he told me, it's tough, this healthcare business, or maybe it's tough because we're treating healthcare as a business. And that stuck with me. And, it's a balance. You do need to treat it as a business, but you also don't need to treat it as a business.
I mean, that's one of the biggest struggles we see in the US is exactly this, right? I mean, we're trying to be clinicians, we're trying to take care of patients. It's a passion, it's a privilege, as you said, but the business side of medicine is really dragging us down. It's really making it hard for us to be able to do the things that we want to do. And we have to work harder, and we're pressing more buttons, and more people are telling us what we can and can't do. We're getting paid less every day. I mean, it's a struggle. So I think it's fascinating that someone like yourself as a clinician wants to engage in the business side, of medicine as well. And obviously there's a different path within Singapore. So now what's your third? What is your third phase of activity that you enjoy?
Yeah, so the third hat I wear is really an independent advisory role that I play with early stage health tech startups. And I often do this with two of my brothers from other mothers and colleagues, Raphael Grossman in the States and Shafi Ahmed in the UK. They're the world's two most watched surgeons. Not sure if you know either of them, but we have always believed ourselves to be health tech advocates and clinical ambassadors. So obviously I need to seek approval from PwC when I do that, but I do independently advise both early stage health tech startups and also governments in terms of health tech ecosystem development and early stage health technologies. And where I particularly focus is the clinical validation side of things, and trying to get early stage health technologies clinically adopted. Because at the end of the day, whether you're coming from the business perspective, the clinical perspective, or the technology perspective, if these technologies are not clinically adopted and used by you and me, right, what's the point? So that's the third hat.
And it's challenging. I was just in Chicago not too long ago at one of the sort of the healthcare technology meetings. And to identify, there are so many companies that have moved into the healthcare technology space, whether it be in the hardware space, whether it be in the software space, whether it's electronic medical record or telemedicine, or it's billing. I mean, it's so hard for me as a clinician to identify who is going to survive and who is not, because there's so much competition. But I'm going to quote you here because I took a little line off of your website, I believe, which is either doctors will either embrace technology in practice or doctors will take their place that do. So it seems to me like you're a big believer that technology is going to enable us to continue the practice of clinical medicine. And so give us some thoughts and ideas as to how you think those things come together.
Yeah, look, I truly believe that, right? We are going to be replaced if we don't use technology by our colleagues who do, right? It's inevitable. I think, looking at the way things have evolved, I mean, if you look at any career, right, or any industry, so the first point actually I'd like to raise is what you said there earlier. You don't know who's going to survive and who's not. When we look at the innovation in healthcare, right, it's like the David and Goliath story. And this is something that I've learned in my corporate role over the last 8 years. The ones who, at least in my experience, who are more likely to survive are those who are coming at healthcare from outside of healthcare, right? It's what we call the new entrants, right? Individuals, small to medium enterprises, startups, who traditionally were not in healthcare. And if we think about that and pause for a moment, it's not that surprising, right? I mean, we take all our lessons on safety from aviation, right? So the best lessons that we've learned are from outside of healthcare. And because these individuals and organizations are okay to fail and understand failure, they're a lot more robust. They come at problems from a different perspective. And I feel that they're more likely to survive, right? Now, to the second point on, just sharing about that evolution and technology. Look, technology today allows us to do pretty much anything, I always say the future is already here. It's not the future, it's the present, right? And, I, or anyone, name some idea that they have to do from a technology perspective, it's doable. We've been talking about data for the longest time, right? Integrating data, for example, EMRs, right? Integration of data, sharing of data is nothing new, right? It can be done. The technology exists today, but yet we are siloed and we are fragmented, and every stakeholder has their own perspective and wants to use it for their own thing. For me, the biggest thing is the lack of collaboration in our industry. And it surprises me because we are collaborative as doctors. We have multidisciplinary team meetings in the OR. You and I couldn't survive without the assistants, without the nurses, without the techs, right? I mean, we are collaborative, but yet we do not collaborate and we do not work together as much as we should. And so to give examples of the kind of technology that exists today, right? I don't know, off the top of my head, one of the best examples I can think of is an ECG solution. Now, coincidentally, it came out of Singapore, right? An ECG solution that does not change the workflow, the clinical workflow, right? It's a software as a medical device solution, and it just picks up any ECG from any machine, right? 5-minute reading, and it uses heart rate variability to predict the chances of a major adverse cardiac event within 72 hours and within a month. This actually immediately lowers the cost of care and improves the care we deliver, but yet we struggle. So that's my biggest frustration.
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting. I think your point was really well taken when it comes to technology elsewhere outside of healthcare, right? Whether it's even the cell phone that's sitting in your hand, the amazing things that we can do outside of the medical world with technology, whether you're getting in your car, your GPS, whatever it may be, there's so many things that are out there. So I think that's a great point that these companies outside of healthcare can bring that technology in. And I think we've been very slow to adopt these types of things. And on the individual level, as you're talking about with the EKG, it could have been very helpful for me 2 years ago as I was ignoring my chest pain to maybe have known that I was at risk for a more significant disease process, for sure. But I think that sort of cross-pollination across technology outside of medicine, I think is really a brilliant point on your part as to who will succeed and who may not. To this effect, Zubin, this is great. I mean, I think that I love the fact that you embrace so many, different ways in which you go to work every day. And I think that's also very interesting as part of your brand, right? So I'm a brand strategist. So I'm going to throw out some love to Matthew Ray Scott. We started off the conversation to say that you just had a talk with him, which we're not surprised because Matthew Ray Scott is the international rock star beard. So not surprising that you found him. But we're writing a book together on branding. And as I look at you and I see your international medical training, right, and your ability to use that to your advantage across a broad spectrum of the things that you do, the fact that you have become a doctorpreneur, again, it's a coin on terms for us. We usually use the word orthopreneur. Maybe we'll convince you to do that as well. But the point being, you're into the business world now. You're an independent consultant. You're also working for Price Waterhouse. All of that has given you street cred, around the world as part of your brand. Now, was that on purpose, or is that just sort of the process and how you have developed who you are?
That's a really interesting question. It has not been on purpose at all. In fact, I'm trying to figure out how to make it on purpose now, right?
Well, you have a great start. You definitely have a great start. I mean, I've interviewed a lot of people. I found you on LinkedIn. So, your message is getting out there, organically at this point, but tell us more.
So that's interesting. And I'm glad to hear it. I actually think branding is important for anyone in any organization. And truth be told, I guess I've come to this perspective a lot because of what I see my wife do. So my wife is a brand strategy consultant, works for one of the largest kind of media companies in the world as the holding company. And she does futures. She leads the innovation and futures department of this company, right? And I used to laugh at her, right? So, when she'd come home from work, I'd be like, one day I was like, honey, what do you actually do? What do you mean branding? Like, how is that important? And she broke it down for me at the time. And often I won't be gender biased, but I do often think that us men don't listen to our wives or partners as much as we should, right? And she explained to me at the time, this is years ago, right? Brand is very important, and when you think of a brand, there are A, B, and C reasons why you need to and what the implications are. And as you build a brand, you need to think of, these 4 or 5 things, whether it's name, whether it's memorable, whether it tells people what you do, etc. Because again, it has implications which are A, B, and C, right? And I brushed it off, right? I was like, well, whatever. Okay, you do branding. Then fast forward a few years, right? And I start getting a bit active on LinkedIn. I try to share messages that come to top of mind. There's no structure, by the way, at this point in time to what I post about or how regular I post. I just post when I feel like it, and and that's wrong. That's part of branding, right? There's a structured process in place.
But as a brand master, you're doing what you're supposed to do, which is you're posting your own material, your own thoughts, your own processes. When you want to do that, you're not paying someone else to do it. And that's helping to create your brand, because people message and identify with you, and then you're part of a larger process.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And I guess what you just said and articulated is something I've only started to realize now, right? But it's important. I mean, if you want to pass a message, well, first of all, lots of people want to pass messages, right? So I think the key is, if you want to pass a message that you feel is of value to others, and which also others feel is of value to them, then you need to think about it in a structured process. And I mean, look, we haven't prepped this, right? This is completely off the cuff, which is why I think it's important that you're doing the book that you're doing, right? I'm excited to see it and learn from it. But it is important for doctors, for organizations in healthcare to do some level of branding. Now, we don't want to go and market ourselves and advertise. I mean, in fact, there are stringent laws in place in Singapore. I'm not sure if that's the same case in the US. But for doctors, our Singapore Medical Council has very strict guidelines of what you can and cannot do.
You can't even chew gum in Singapore, if I'm not mistaken.
I remember the day that law was introduced overnight in the papers.
Literally, you can't chew. You can go to jail if you put gum out on the street. Am I wrong or am I right?
Actually, you're wrong.
Okay.
I believe if you're chewing gum in Singapore, you're not going to get arrested, but you cannot sell or distribute gum in Singapore. So it's not available.
I love it. Well, look, I want to give a shout out to my wife too, because that's where I learned branding from as well. She's a huge Instagram influencer, the French floral world. She's got an amazing book, French Blooms. You should buy it. Whoever's listening, we love it. It's actually one of the #1 selling floral books in the world. And but no, she's the one that sort of said, look, Scott, you have a great message. The things that you want to do, you should be able to share that. So she started me on this path as well. And I think that we're excited to be able to share our book and be able to provide some counsel and basic ideas and concepts. We're going to provide avatars. We're going to talk about people that have been successful to provide examples as well. But listen, Zubin, this was great, man. I really appreciate the time that we had here. You are my absolute favorite Singaporean Parsi orthopedic surgeon. I mean, it's not even close. The only one. It's not even close, #2. Are you kidding me? No, literally. I love your passion for clinical medicine. I love your passion for the business of medicine. And I also love your passion for being a mentor, thought leader, in the healthcare space as an independent consultant as well. You got a lot of great stuff you're doing, brother. Really great.
Appreciate those kind words, Scott. Really appreciate it.
No, it's been a pleasure having you on, and we're going to share you with the rest of the world at this point. We are now officially part of the Singaporean orthopedic world. This is Dr. Scott Sigmund, #FollowTheFro, host of The Ortho Show. Till next time.